Welcome back, fellow data geeks. So today I want to cover an expansion on the last video, so using our if statements, but this time using if statements where we've got multiple criteria. So one of the things that we're trying to build up here is our full data table using this input that we have. So we've got our monthly, quarterly and yearly costs. So what we need to do is fill in the gaps by using either our monthly, our quarterly or our yearly costs to then calculate the missing information that we have. So we end up with a full table like this. So what I want to cover is how we put an if statement together if we want to match against multiple criteria. So we want to say, for example, if monthly is populated, give us the monthly cost. If it isn't, then have we got a quarterly or a yearly cost that we can then use to work out the calculation we want? So I'm just going to jump back to the previous example that we were using. So this is where we've got our if statements in here to do our calculations based on this table. So what I'm going to do is get rid of all of this and we're going to start again. It's going to be an expansion, as I said, on the on our formulas that we've been building up over the last few tutorials. So I'm just going to jump over here where I've started to kind of write out some of the syntax that we're looking at. So as you remember, in our basic if statement, we've got our logical test, our value if true, and then our value if false. If we've got multiple criteria that we want to match, our value if false basically becomes a second if statement. So we'll have our logical test, our value if true, and instead of our value if false, we'll have a secondary if statement, which will give us the option of defining that second criteria. So in the example that we've got over here, so we want to say that we've got a value in the monthly. So we know we need to populate the monthly in here. However, for example, in this cell down here, we know that the monthly value is blank. So what we're going to do is start with our basic if statement. So equals if. So our logical test will be to say, is this cell, so C7, is it populated or is it blank? So what we're going to say is does not equal, so that's the two arrows, does not equal and blank, which is our two double quotes. So if we're saying if it's not blank, we want to select this cell. However, our false statement would now be to do a calculation based on one of the other cells. So what we don't know is it quarterly or is it yearly that's populated? So our secondary if statement will now become our value if false. So if now our secondary logical test value will be to work out how do we now calculate from the other two fields. So what we want to say is quarterly blank. So if quarterly does equal blank, then our value if true, we know we now need to use our yearly cost. So we're going to take our yearly cost and divide that by 12 so that we get 1 month. However, if our quarterly value isn't blank, so our value if false, we now need to take our quarterly value and divide that by 3 because we know that this is 3 months worth. So we divide by 3 to get our single month. So then we close our bracket from our secondary if statement. We now need to close our bracket from our first if statement as well. So that gives us 10. So if we divide our 120, because we know that it's populated here, divide that by 12, then that is 10. Okay, so let's just go back over that. So what we're saying here is if the monthly cost isn't blank, so if it's populated, then just give us that value. However, if it is blank, we now need to start a secondary if statement because we need to use the yearly or the quarterly. So the next part, our secondary if statement, will say if the quarterly cost is blank, then give us the yearly cost divided by 12. However, if that's false, so our quarterly cost is populated, then divide that by 3. So that will give us 10. And if we pull that formula, in the way that we can pull the formula down, we can also pull that formula up. So we're just going to drag that up here. And we can see here we've got 800, which matches our monthly value here. If we double click, that's because our first statement says if C3, so if our monthly cost isn't blank, then just give us that value. So if we drag the formula all the way to the bottom of the table, we should also see that our ones where we've got a quarterly cost populated, so here in our train pass, we can see that it has taken our 150 and divided that by 3. Now, the way it's done that is to say our monthly cost, C18, is blank. So it can't give us C18. So our value, if true, then starts our secondary if statement, which says if our quarterly cost, so D18, is blank, well, it isn't. So we skip this part and it's jumping straight onto our value if false, which is our quarterly divided by 3. So what we've got here is a formula which combines our calculation, so our division, our if statement, and we're now covering a multiple if statement. So if we want to take the quarterly field and populate that, we need a slightly different formula this time, because what we need to do is say if the quarterly is blank or isn't blank, what do we want to do? We want to then work it out from our monthly or our yearly, depending on which one has a value in. So what we will do here is equals if. So we'll say if D3 does not equal blank, then our value, if true, will be just to give us that quarterly cost. However, if that's false, so if our quarterly is blank, then we need to start our secondary if statement. So if, so next we want to work out, is it the monthly or the yearly that's populated? So if we say, if the monthly is blank, then we know we have to take the yearly cost. So our value, if true, will be our calculation, and that will be to take the yearly cost divided by 4. The reason for that is because we've obviously got we want a quarterly, so that's 3 months, and with our 12 months over the year, we know we've got 4 quarters. So if C3 is blank, we'll use the yearly cost to calculate our value. However, if it isn't blank, then we want to use our quarterly, then we want to use our monthly, sorry, to calculate our quarterly cost. So our value, if false, on this secondary if statement will be to take our monthly cost and times that by 3, because we want the 3 months. So then we close off our second if statement and we close off our first if statement and we hit return. So 2,400, and that is our 800 times by 3. And again, if we pull this all the way down to the bottom, we can see where our monthly and our quarterly are blank. It's used our yearly cost to calculate our £30. Okay, so to recap again on our multiple multiple criteria, we're going to now populate our yearly cost. So again, we need to work out, is this already populated in our table, or do we need to use the monthly or the quarterly to work that out? So we're going to start with our first if statement, equals if, open bracket. Our logical test will be to say, is the yearly cost equal to blank or not? So we're going to say, if it does not equal blank, so if there's something in it, then take that value. So select E3. However, if it is blank, we want to start our secondary if statement. And our logical test this time will be to say, if our monthly equals blank, we know then that we need to use our quarterly to calculate our yearly cost. So our value, if true, will become our quarterly cost times by 4, because we know there are 4 quarters over a year. However, if that's false, so if our monthly cost is populated, then we want to take our monthly cost and times that by 12 to get our 12 months. So again, we close off our secondary if statement, another bracket to close off our first statement, and hit return. So as you can see here now, we've got our 9,600 is calculated by working out that our yearly cost is empty, our monthly is populated, so it's going to use our monthly to do the calculation. And again, if we drop that all the way down to the bottom, you can see that that formula now consistently gives us a result based on if the yearly is empty or populated, and it will then work out, do I need to take the quarterly or the monthly column to give us our result? So again, I'm just going to scroll back over here and show you the syntax that we've got. So our basic if statement says logical test value, value if true, and our value if false. If we've got our multiple criteria, then we have our logical test and our value if true. However, our value if false will now become the second if statement. So what I've done here is taken an example of the one of the formulas we've just done in the table, and you can see that our logical test is in green. So if C4 doesn't equal blank, so if there's something in there, then give us that value. And our secondary if statement follows exactly the same criteria by giving us a logical test, a value if true, and a value if false. So in our example, we said if our monthly is not blank, then give us the monthly value. However, if the value in the monthly is blank, then take our quarterly. If that is blank, use the yearly cost and divide it by 12. And if the quarterly is not blank, then give us the quarterly divided by 3. So there's quite a lot to get your head around with multiple criteria in our if statements. I'll put all of these examples up on the screen at the end so that you can have a look in more detail, play around with those. This example is quite a good one because we know that we've got our 3 columns and some are populated and some aren't, but we can use whichever one does have a value in to calculate the other 2. Please just add to the comments with any questions or any issues that you might be having with the logic. If there's anything you're not sure of or that you need any help with, then just shout me out in the comments and I will get back to you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you can be alerted of any future videos that I post in the tutorial. Thanks again for watching and I'll see you on the next one.